The sound of water gently hitting the rotting wood is the first thing heard as the eyes still try to adjust to the light slipping through the cracks of the improvised ceiling. But it's not the sound of a clean river, nor of a calm sea. It's a thick, heavy sound, as if each wave carried memories of what was thrown away, forgotten, discarded. Waking up there is not waking up to a new day, it's relearning how to resist an old scene that repeats itself with new marks on the body and another layer of odor. In the air, some might think it's impossible to live on top of that. But people do live, because sometimes living simply means not dying. The houses float because they have no ground. They are pieces of wood tied together by hope, supported by old barrels and promises that if it held up today, maybe it will hold up tomorrow. 2. There are no foundations, but there is routine. And that, in itself, is already a kind of structure. The air is humid, but not fresh. It's a humidity that carries residue. The skin never truly dries. And even when the sun shines strong, it's a heat that doesn't purify, it only stifles. The residents don't feel proud of the smell that follows them, but they have no choice. It's part of their body, their home, their clothes. And in a way, it has already become part of their identity. Children learn to swim before they can walk steadily. But what they call swimming, there's a mix of survival and habit. The waters they dive into are the same that receive sewage, garbage, and leftovers of everything the nearby city no longer wants. Even so, the little ones smile. Not because they are happy, but because they haven't yet learned to measure. Danger through the eyes of adults. Schools are far away. To reach them, you have to paddle, sometimes for hours. When it rains, access is cut off. When the sun is too strong, the canoe heats up. Some mothers tie their children's notebooks in plastic bags so they don't get wet. Others simply teach what they know at home, even without knowing if what they know is enough. Because their knowledge is also floating, it's whatever can stay above the waterline. Food comes from trades, donations, improvisations. Many fish, but what they catch is almost never safe to eat. Still, it goes into the pot. Because the stomach doesn't wait for lab results. There are more empty pots than full plates, and even so, when a neighbor gets a little extra, they share. Sharing there isn't charity, it's a survival instinct. There's a silence that spreads when night falls. It's not the silence of peace, it's the silence of exhaustion, of fear, of not knowing if the structure will hold through another night of current or collapse under the weight of its own precariousness. Those who live there learn to sleep with one ear awake, because sometimes a crack in the wood is the sign that something is sinking. Adults avoid mirrors, not out of vanity, but for protection. Seeing their own reflection in murky waters is to face the thin line between what they are and what they pretend to be just to keep going. There's no room for existential crises. There's only the now, the next bucket bath, the next boat trip to the small market, the next attempt to get a cheap chicken at the dock. Diseases don't give warnings. They show up like an unhealed cut, a fever that won't break, a cough that won't go away. Health clinics are far. The numbers are limited. And respect is scarce. Some learn to use herbs, others pray. Everyone resists. And even when someone leaves, it's as if the water absorbs the grief quickly, carrying the pain away but leaving the emptiness floating behind. Electric power is tapped with gatos, illegal wiring. Cables stretch across improvised poles, twisted around pieces of metal, held by hope and electrical tape. Sometimes they short-circuit, sometimes they fall, but sometimes they work. And when the television turns on, even with static, even with a bad picture, it's like a window into a world where the ground is solid and bathrooms flush. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel the weight of this reality too. Keep reading. Because understanding this world is the only way to stop pretending it doesn't exist. Parties are simple, but intense. A radio playing loud, A fire in an old drum, children dancing barefoot on wet wood. There's no luxury, but there's presence. For a few hours they forget the smell, the swaying, the risk. They are just together. Laughing, shouting, existing. Faith is liquid, but not fragile. It spreads through whispered prayers and promises made while looking at the cloudy sky. Many believe this isn't the end, but a step. That living over water is a metaphor. And that someday God will bring solid ground. Until then, they keep praying. Even when prayer is just a thought kept in silence. Some dream of leaving. Others don't know what they'd do outside. The floating favela becomes, over time, a kind of identity. A sense of belonging that doesn't come from choice, but from repetition. Because after years on the water, it's hard to imagine what it's like to live with ground. And the fear of the new sometimes screams louder than the pain of the present. Violence exists. It's not constant, but it's present. Sometimes it comes from outside, sometimes from within. Conflicts over space, food, silence. But there are also invisible pacts. Silent agreements between neighbors who know that if one falls, everyone wobbles. And so, they take care of each other with a delicacy concrete doesn't understand. Children make toys from what they find. Bottles become boats, foam pieces become pillows, caps become games. Creativity there isn't a luxury. It's an emotional survival tool. Because without play, childhood sinks. Some write. Invisible poets who jot down thoughts in damp notebooks. They write about the water, about the weight of unfiltered brightness, about the fear that everything might one day disappear with the tide. They don't publish, but they write. And that, in itself, is already resistance. The local culture mixes everything, rhythms, prayers, accents. Each resident brings a piece of another land, of another ground left behind. And there, over the waters, they create a patchwork of humanity where the only possible seam is affection. The government shows up from time to time, with promises, with photos, with pretty words. Sometimes it brings a boat with food. Other times, it just takes notes and leaves. The residents have learned not to expect, but they haven't lost hope either. Because that's what sustains them, the thin line between disbelief and faith. Trash floats. But it's also part of the landscape. Some collect it, sort it, sell it. Some ignore it. Some transform it. Because where everything is lacking, even trash is opportunity. It's not romanticizing, it's adapting. Visitors are shocked. They don't understand how it's possible to live there. But they live. And living there is a verb conjugated between fear and courage, between nausea and attachment, between what's missing and what overflows in invisible bonds. If this touched you so far, share it. Leave your comment. Give voice to this reality that floats on the margins of what the world prefers not to see. And know, even among dirty waters, clean lives still try to bloom. This is the channel What Life Is Like. Here, every story is a mirror, and every silence a revelation. The smell that rises from the waters is almost always the same, but sometimes it changes. It becomes more acidic when the heat scorches, thicker when the rain mixes everything together. It's a kind of scent of precariousness, impossible to describe with precision, but easy to recognize for those who have already learned to breathe by instinct. Lungs there don't complain, they adapt. It's either adaptation or fever. It's conscious breathing or the burning exhaustion from within. The elders speak little. Their eyes say more than any sentence. They've already seen the wood rot and be patched up. They've seen neighbors leave and their houses remain empty, floating like skeletons no one dares to dismantle. They know what comes with the flood and what stays when the current takes everything away. And that's why they walk slowly, as if their very bodies were a warning that time there is heavier than in concrete cities. Hands are always busy, rowing, stitching, improvising. They are hands marked by small cuts, thick calluses, automatic gestures that reveal a wisdom no book ever taught. There, those who don't know how to do something with their hands don't survive, because machines don't arrive, because public services don't reach, because the water washes away everything that isn't resilient, including promises. Some nights are harder, not because of the cold, but because of the sound of the wind hitting the fragile structures. When the roof creaks too much, no one sleeps peacefully. The fear isn't of the wind, but of what it brings. A simple crack can be the start of a collapse. And when that happens, there are no firefighters, no sirens, just neighbors jumping from house to house, holding ropes, shouting names, trying to save whoever is still close. There's a mutual aid system no one ever taught, but everyone practices. If one boat breaks, another is lent. If a baby is born, neighbors bring clean cloths and pieces of soap. If someone falls ill, a silent chain forms. One watches the kids, another makes tea, another goes to the doc to find some expired medicine that might still work. It's an invisible network that appears in no report, but holds everything together. The women have steady eyes, not because they don't cry, but because they've learned to cry in a way that the other side of the house doesn't notice. They carry buckets, clean fish scales, care for children, for clothes, for bills, for hope. They're the ones who keep the houses standing, even when the planks give way. They're the ones who know the name of every hole in the wood, every leak in the roof, every improvised fix. The young dream of cell phones, branded clothes, songs that talk about luxury. But they also dream of a bathroom of their own, of a bed that doesn't rock, of a silence that doesn't need to be bought. And even when they dress with pride, with straight caps and firm smiles, their gaze still reveals they don't feel part of anything beyond that piece of wood floating in oblivion. Some try to leave. They get a job outside, save money, rent a tiny room in the city, but in time, some come back. Because out there is another kind of violence, the judgmental stare, the door that shuts, the paycheck that doesn't cover the rent. And because, as hard as it is to live on water, there they still have a name, a story, someone who calls their face with affection. Not suspicion. Television says it's a dangerous place. It shows quick images of alleys between stilt houses, children playing in trash, young people being taken by police. But it doesn't show the father teaching his son to paddle, the mother making cake with donated flour, the grandfather telling old stories around a candle. The media shows what shocks, but what sustains doesn't appear. And maybe that's why the world keeps pretending it has nothing to do with it. If this is stirring something in you, share this story. Give voice to those who don't have one. Every comment you leave is like a lit lantern over a forgotten place. The religious arrive frequently. They bring words, sometimes soup. Some plant true faith, others only ego. But even those are welcomed with respect, because any visit is better than complete abandonment. Spirituality there doesn't have a specific outfit, nor always a church, but it has strength. It's in the chants, in the corners of mouths, in the corners of eyes that still shine even with restrained tears. Animals also live on the water. Skinny dogs, skittish cats, chickens balancing on planks. They're part of the routine. They sleep beside people. They hunt what they find. Sometimes they disappear. Sometimes they return. They're part of the family without needing explanation. Because there, whoever is together is welcomed, even without pedigree, even without a collar, even without an owner. Children learn early not to ask. They know everything is counted, that whatever arrives needs to last. But even so, they share. A pack of cookies can become a feast. A broken toy becomes a party. Because joy, when it finds space, multiplies like a plant sprouting from a crack. In concrete. The improvised boats reveal impressive creativity. Tires become buoys. Large cans become floats. Old curtains become sails. There, anything that floats can be transformed. And with each transformation, a small victory against daily. Shipwreck. Night falls slowly, but darkness is never complete. There's always a point of light coming from somewhere. A lantern, a candle, a half-open window. And it's in those small lights that residents cling to. Because there's no facing the night without believing that tomorrow the sky will still hold the structure they call home. Time there isn't counted by clocks. It's measured by falling rains, falling roofs, growing children. Each season brings a new challenge, a new adaptation. There's no boredom. There's waiting. There's trying. There's constant movement. The fishermen have calloused hands. And stories that don't fit in a few words. Some were once men of solid ground. Others were born on the water. All have something in common. The ability to find sustenance where others see only filth. It takes courage to cast a net where there's so much debris. And faith to believe something good might still come with the tide. There's a floating soccer field made of old planks and hand-stitched nets. There's no referee, no uniforms. But there's competition, shouting, cheering. And for an hour, no one thinks about the filthy water, the scarce food, the illness, just the ball, the goal, the joy. The improvised schools operate in rooms that float. They are fragile structures with creaking floors and canvas walls. But inside, there are scribbled notebooks, stained blackboards, children's voices trying to spell out the future. The teachers arrive by boat. Some were once students in that same space. Others come from afar, guided by a sense of mission most people have forgotten exists. They know it's not about memorizing words, but about opening windows in a place where there are barely any walls. The students learn to live with the sound of dripping water inside the classroom, with the gentle sway of the waves, with the winds that barge in uninvited. They learn to write even without desks, to read even without light, to listen even when everything sounds like noise. School, there is not a guaranteed right. It's a collective effort that resists indifference. And every literate child becomes a silent scream against the fate others try to impose. Access to healthcare is a boat that doesn't always arrive. Sometimes a task force brings basic care, vaccines, bandages, quick tests. But most cases are treated with teas, prayers, and a forced patience. Simple illnesses become major threats. Small wounds turn into tragedies. And still, there are those who continue to fight, to care for others, to learn remedies that mix folk. Medicine with intuition. Pregnant women walk slowly across unstable planks. Many don't know if they'll reach a real hospital in time. Some give birth in their own homes, helped by neighbors who became midwives out of necessity. Births are always accompanied by silence and prayer. Because there, every new life is a miracle floating amid abandonment. Food comes from what the water offers, or what the city discards. Small fish, vegetables grown in reused bottles, bags of leftovers arriving from wealthier places. Meals are simple, repetitive, sometimes insufficient. But even with little, sharing turns each meal into a ritual. A plate of rice and beans can become a symbol of resistance. There's no garbage collection. What can be reused becomes building. Material, what can't is pushed away or sinks on its own. Children grow up seeing plastic float like black flowers in dirty water. And they learn, far too early, that the world out there doesn't mind dumping into them what it doesn't want to see again. Many homes have an altar. Small, improvised, but full of faith. Candles, worn images, newspaper clippings, handwritten prayer notes. It's not just religion, it's comfort. It's what's left when there's no ambulance, no judge, no lawyer. It's what fills the void left by the state. And whoever enters those homes feels the sacred silence of those who believe even without proof. The local culture is made of mixed sounds, the handmade drum, the old radio, the off-key singing. There are parties that happen even without electricity, with bonfires lit over cut drums. The dances have no stage, only damp ground and bodies that know how to move gracefully even between leaks. Because celebrating there isn't a luxury. It's a way of remembering they're still alive. Some young people have created community radios. They broadcast through hanging loudspeakers, spreading news, music, announcements. It's a spoken newspaper that crosses aquatic alleys and reaches where even cell phone signals don't. These local voices have become sonic resistance. Those who listen get informed. Those who speak feel empowered. And between one news segment and another, poetry, outbursts, and stories no one else would tell are born. Children develop unique skills. They learn to row before they learn to run. They know how to patch holes in boats, stitch bags with fishing line, build toys from floating trash. Creativity is trained by scarcity. And even while living in a setting that defies any logic of development, they keep inventing, playing, surviving with an intelligence that doesn't fit in school report cards. If this account is touching you in any way, write in the comments what surprised you the most so far. Your reaction is the bridge between this world and yours. Commerce happens on boats. There are floating markets with overripe fruit, live fish, second-hand clothes. Prices vary depending on the tide, the vendor's mood, and the state of the goods. It's a parallel, living, pulsing economy that doesn't appear in national statistics, but sustains dozens of families without any formal support. Floods are constant. When the tide rises too much, some homes are temporarily abandoned. People place their belongings in high spots, wrap mattresses in tarps, tie furniture with ropes. With each flood, something is lost, but everything is relearned again. It's a cruel, yet familiar cycle. The improvised bridges connect homes, families, lives. They're pieces of wood placed over drums, tires, whatever is available. They serve as streets, hallways, meeting points. There, every step is calculated. There's no rushing, only care. And even the most distracted visitors quickly learn to respect the rhythm of balance. Cell phones are few, but valuable. They're windows to a world that seems to promise another kind of life. Social media shows realities that contrast with the mud on the ground. And even when they seem out of reach, those images also nourish. Because dreaming there is still free. The greatest fear isn't poverty, it's invisibility. It's being erased from maps, from speeches, from decisions. People know they're no one's priority. But they go on as those who resist out of stubbornness, as those who believe dignity doesn't depend on a fancy address. Visitors who arrive fall silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't know how to speak without offending. It's a silence of those who realize that there's much more than misery there. There's self-organization, a unique aesthetic, beauty that doesn't fit the usual standards, and understanding that takes more than empathy. It takes humility. Children sometimes ask if it's true there are houses with firm floors, where one can run without fear, and the adults hesitate. Because saying yes feeds desire, and saying no is lying. So they answer with stories, with metaphors, with affection. Because even without offering everything, they still try to offer meaning. Mothers are like floating roots. They steady the unstable. They feed what's adrift. Even without certainty, they go on with faith. Even without guarantees, they go on with love. And each of their gestures is like a silent prayer for the world to someday truly look at that patch of life on the water. Dreams, as fragile as they may seem, are born strong in that forgotten territory. They are whispered before sleep, scribbled on damp scraps of paper, shared in hushed conversations in the floating alleys. A girl wants to be a doctor, even though she has never seen a real hospital. A boy collects bottle caps as if they were invisible diplomas. Each small hope is an act of resistance against the destiny that insists on denying them the right to choose. Some families try to leave. They manage to save some money, sell the floating house, catch a ride with relatives on solid ground. But not everyone adapts. The big city demands too much. Prejudice is subtle but constant, and many end up returning to the same place they left, carrying on their backs the certainty that the problem wasn't just poverty, it was the indifference of the rest of the world. Even so, there are those who insist on building a different tomorrow. Small projects are born from donated scraps, from recycled ideas. A young man created a nighttime literacy course using flashlights and a wall painted with charcoal. A woman set up a garden in drums using rainwater that had been filtered. A couple built a floating library with books donated by those who still believe reading saves. Beauty there is not obvious, but it is everywhere. In the reflection of the sun on wet planks. In the sound of the hammock being set up while a distant radio plays. In the tired but steady gaze of someone carrying dirty water as if it were treasure. And even on nights when everything feels dark. Inside, the light outside never goes out, reminding them that time does not wait, but it also doesn't stop anyone from trying. The children know more than they should. They know where it's safe to step, where the wood is rotten, where the boat gets stuck. They know when the smell of the water is different, when the tide warns of danger. They are experts at surviving in an environment that demands early wisdom. And still, they find time to play with dolls made of foam and soap boxes. Every game there is a truce. The elders watch everything with a mix of pride and resignation. They know how much they've lost. They know what it would mean to abandon what they call home. But they also know the story of that place won't be told through statistics. It will be told through the memory of those who lived, who loved, who dreamed, even on unstable ground. The music doesn't come from studios. It comes from the mouths of the people. From beats made with bottles, from lyrics improvised on the aquatic corners. These are songs about loss, faith, courage. Songs that name the ones who left and celebrate those who were born. Each song carries a story. Each verse is a piece of reality that no outsider would dare compose. When it rains hard, the favela becomes a mirror of the sky. The waters rise, the sounds blend together, and the houses seem to move all at once, as if the entire community were breathing together. It's a silent and tense spectacle. People gather what they can, hold on to what they have, and wait. Because they've already learned that it's not possible to beat nature, but it is possible to get through it. Some newspapers do quick reports on the area. They film from above, with drones, show statistics, compare it to other places. But they almost never enter. They almost never look into the eyes of the people who live there. And those who float have gotten used to that kind of attention. Punctual, superficial, almost always sensationalist. As if they were scenery, not people. Even with all this, there are weddings, there are parties. There are improvised celebrations with reused balloons, cracked cakes, laughter echoing over the water, because life insists. Because love still finds space between the mold and the generator noise. And each union there is a manifesto that, despite everything, it's still possible to dream together. The lanterns hanging on houses work like artificial stars. They light the way between one bridge and another. They are domestic lighthouses, lights of resistance. Some go out with the wind, others flicker with the tide. But there is always someone willing to light them again. Because their going dark is too dangerous. You need to be seen, even when no one wants to look. If you've made it this far, it's because you understand that dignity does not depend on an address. Share this story. Help ensure these voices are not lost. Clothes dry. On improvised clotheslines. Many have been worn by others before, donated through campaigns or forgotten in sacks that came from far away. But there, they gain new life. They are mended, adapted, valued. Because beauty, in that territory, isn't made of brands, it's made of care. Time passes slowly. Not because the days are long, but because everything takes more effort. Getting to the other side of the favela takes time. Shopping takes time. Caring for someone sick takes time. Living there is like rowing against the current. You don't move far, but you don't sink easily either. Animals are part of the landscape. Skinny dogs, alert cats, chickens balanced on planks. All survive as best they can. There's no pet food, no veterinarian. But there is affection. And that affection, even if simple, creates bonds as strong as those of any family. Young people grow up between fear and the desire to leave. They want to study, work, travel. But they know the path is difficult, full of closed gates and suspicious stares. Even so, they try. They take online courses with unstable internet. They send resumes. They apply for scholarships. Each opportunity is grabbed like a literal life-saving plank. The nights are quiet, except for the sound of water hitting the structures and low conversations. In those moments, many ask themselves whether it's worth going on. But they are soon interrupted by a baby's cry, a burst of laughter, a memory. And they understand the real question isn't, is it worth it? But how can I keep making it worthwhile? Faith isn't a luxury, it's a foundation. People don't believe because everything will get better. They believe because they need something greater than abandonment. Because believing in that floating space is what anchors the soul when the body can no longer find solid ground. At the end of each day, when the tide recedes and the wind blows gently over the creaking boards, the floating favela breathes. Not with relief, but with the exhaustion worthy of those who have resisted once more. The bodies retreat, but the thoughts continue to float, as if they too couldn't find rest. And it is in this endless fatigue that many find the exact measure of what they call life. Childhood there is not sweet, but it is strong. Growing up in that environment demands more than courage. It demands adaptation, silence, and a stubborn kind of hope. Children learn to row before they can add. They learn to wash clothes by hand before understanding what a new notebook is. And even with bare feet, they keep moving forward, as if stopping were never an option. The community's improvised architecture hides ancestral wisdom. Every piece of wood, every knot, every hanging structure follows a silent logic, built through repetition and attentive listening. Those who built it didn't follow a manual, they followed necessity. And that, in itself, is a form of genius. On days when the sun doesn't appear, and the sky is covered in a gray that seems to press down on the river, everything feels harder. The humidity seeps into the bones, the mud rises along the banks, and fear returns to haunt them. Fear that everything might collapse, fear that no one will come to help, fear that even while alive, they'll be treated as invisible. But there are also days when the sky opens, and the reflection of the light on the water turns the favela into a broken mirror, full of unpredictable sparkles. People take advantage of those moments. They wash, they dry, they repair, they smile. And for brief instants, the weight of existence seems to dissolve in the warm vapor rising from the damp wood. What impresses most about those who live there isn't their pain, it's the dignity with which they endure it. There is no spectacle of misery, there is resistance. There is order within disorder. There are internal codes of respect, care, mutual support. Those who don't live there can't understand. But those who watch with an open heart can feel it. There's no luxury, but there is ethics. There are those who share the little they have, those who give up their own space to shelter another, those who teach what they know without expecting anything in return. These are gestures that, outside of there, might be forgotten. But there, they are what hold everything together. When someone dies, there are no grand ceremonies. The body is mourned with improvised candles, softly sung songs, silent tears. But there is also a kind of quiet pride, the pride of knowing that, until their final breath, that person resisted. They lived where many wouldn't dare step. And that alone is a legacy. The water that surrounds everything also shapes everything. It is not just an element of the landscape. It is a constant presence, a daily challenge, a living metaphor. It can carry, destroy, wash, hide. It can be ally or enemy. But it is never neutral. And because of that, everyone learns to respect it. The market is made of exchanges. Fish for rice, soap for flour, a favor for a piece of bread. Money circulates. Little, but solidarity is abundant. And when there's a major crisis, a flood, a disease, a prolonged shortage, the community unites as if it were one body, trying to survive through the strength of unity. Education is a distant luxury for many. But it is not absent. There are those who teach letters with charcoal, who use cardboard boxes as blackboards, who memorize poems without ever having read a full book. Because words, even loose, even crooked, can still set people free. And those trapped in the same setting need windows, even if they're made of words. The scars hurt, but they also mark the journey. There are open wounds, unresolved stories, traumas passed down from generation to generation. But there's also a kind of raw wisdom, forged in discomfort. Those born floating learn to see cracks as part of the scenery. The absence of the state is no surprise. Formal power rarely shows up. When it does, it's to repress, remove, forbid. Never to listen, never to build together. And those who live, they already understand that survival depends more on the neighbor than on any authority. Even so, they don't want pity. They don't want to be news of tragedy. They want to be recognized as part of society, as people, as citizens. They want their stories told not as exceptions, but as part of what the world chooses to ignore every day. There are those who write. In notebooks, on walls, in improvised diaries. They tell what they've seen, what they dream of, what they fear. These are voices that may never reach publishers, but they carry more truth than many speeches. Because they were written with wet eyes and bare feet, sometimes hope appears in unlikely forms. An anonymous donation, an unexpected visit, an opportunity that comes by chance. And when that happens, the community reacts with a kind of restrained joy, like those who have learned to celebrate without expecting too much. If this touched you in any way, share it. Because silence can also be complicity. And every ignored story is a life pushed even further into oblivion. Mothers raise children alone. Fathers build what they can. Grandparents tell stories while mending clothes. And the children, even afraid, look to the future as if daring logic itself. Life there is hard, but also full of small victories. Sundays are different days. There's warmer food, more time for conversation, more smell of seasoning. Clothes are washed with more care, hair combed with more affection, gestures are softer. It's when the community remembers that, despite everything, it is still a family. Each floating house has its own personality. Some are colorful, others made of scraps of billboards, others covered in transparent plastic. But all of them carry stories. All hold laughter, screams, secrets. And all, somehow still stand in the silence of the early morning. It's possible to hear the movement of the water beneath the boards. It's a continuous sound, like ancestral breathing, as if the place itself were alive. And maybe it is. Because what is built with so much pain and persistence gains a soul of its own. If you watched this far, it's because you understand that this story isn't about misery, it's about resistance. It's about what happens when the world turns its back, and, even so, someone chooses to keep going. The floating favela is the portrait of a Brazil that many prefer not to see. A Brazil that exists on the margins, in the corners, in the murky waters of inequality. But it's also a Brazil of strength, of creativity, of humanity. In the end, the question that echoes isn't, why do they live like this? But why? Do they still live like this? And that question must be asked aloud, repeated, demanded. Because each person there deserves more than survival. They deserve dignity. The water still flows. The boats still float. the voices still rise. And as long as that happens, as long as there is someone willing to tell this story, the favela will not be forgotten. Because sometimes, all a people need is for the world to listen, truly listen. This is the channel that shows what life is. Like, no filters, no makeup, just reality. If this story moved you, like, comment, and share. And subscribe. Because here, the truth never sinks.